Hello, and thank you for joining me today on my new channel, Weathered Oak Media. I'm Will, and you're looking at my 1/700 scale model of the famous ocean liner RMS Titanic from Academy Models. I built it between 2010 and 2011. This was my first model ship, and it has its imperfections, but it kicked off what's become one of my favorite hobbies. I really learned a lot on this one. In 2012, I posted a slideshow video of the build on my previous channel, The Wandering Oak, right around the 100th anniversary of the real ship's tragic sinking. 8 years later, that video has had nearly 64,000 views and a lot of wonderful comments. And so as a thank you to everyone, and to mark the 10th anniversary of when I started building scale model seagoing ships, try saying that 3 times fast, I thought that I would revisit that video and talk about the build process in a little bit more detail. So I hope you stick around, but first, I get to try out something new here. This is my very first one of those title/intro video thingies that people make. I'm really excited to try this out, so please check it out, and I will be back in just a few seconds. Welcome back. Once again, I'm Will, and you're watching my revisit to the Building RMS Titanic video I originally posted back in 2012. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to replay that original video, and I'm going to squish myself down into a little box, and I'll do sort of a director's commentary thing, as well as answer some of the questions that came up in the comments section along the way. I just need a moment here to get that video started. So my video opens with this slow pass of the completed ship's starboard side, along with a little bit of text to just sort of explain the project, before it flashes into my very first attempt at a lens flare effect for the title sequence. I know that this footage is a little bit shaky, but if it helps, try to imagine you're on a little boat as this great big ship is passing you by. So even though this was my first ship, I decided before I even started that I was going to paint most of the parts first before assembly. And some people would build first and then paint. That's fine, there's no right or wrong way to do it. Whatever works best for you is the way to do this. I just thought that it would work better for me because I could see that some parts were going to be really hard to get to once they were added onto the ship. A lot of people have also asked me about the paints. I paint all of my ships by brush using Tamiya and Model Master acrylic paints that kindly clean up with water. And I also do a lot of custom blending of the colors to get them a bit closer to where I want them to be, but I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to keep that to myself. Unfortunately, the poor lighting conditions when I took these photos don't really help very much. The colors are not as bright as they appear here on camera, like these funnels. And someone else had also pointed out that the little benches that are all over the deck here should be a darker shade of wood brown. Whoops. Let's just pretend that the crew covered them up with canvas to protect them from the elements, and we'll move on, okay? Now when it came time to actually build the ship's main structural elements, I pretty much followed the guidebook, which had me build up the ship in sections or blocks, which would then be assembled from the hull up. And this made sense to me. It's pretty close to how they do it in a real shipyard, but of course at a much smaller scale. I also left off some parts just to avoid accidental damage during handling because, well, shit happens. But other than that, all of these blocks came together really quite nicely for their scale. Again, this was my first kit, so I didn't care so much about different parts being accurate. I just wanted them to look nice. During the time that I was working on this ship, my day job was actually a commercial painter. And one of the things that I learned on that job was that if you want a color like red to really pop, a gray primer really helps. And you know, I'm really quite proud of this part of the ship. I think this was my favorite part of the ship, and it turned out beautifully. Again, I did this all by brush. That yellow stripe, however, was a bit of a pain in the ass. It was tricky to get that taped the way I wanted it to go, so that's why I freehanded the starboard side just by brush. And after touch-ups, it actually turned out a lot better than I could have hoped for. These are those blocks that I had mentioned earlier. These are the different sections that were pre-built and ready to just drop into the hull. This is also where I added all of those little details that I had left out earlier. I wish I knew about the photo etch railings back at the time that I made this ship. I think they look way better than the chunky plastic ones that came with this kit, but these are the things you learn on a first model. Before main assembly, I marked the inside of the hull with my initials and dates, and then I started installing the fore and aft sections. They went in quite nicely. I also couldn't forget the coin ceremony. I learned about this old shipbuilding tradition before I started building, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to do that too. Everything else came together quite nicely, though I did have a few little minor fitting issues up near the bridge. The decals were a little bit tricky, but they turned out a little bit better than I could have hoped for. I actually used a small dab of glue to help hold them onto the masts, and that clear coat also helped. And we end it with some more of that shaky footage. But again, try to think of the 108-year-old footage of the real ship. It's going to be a little shaky too. The music was also a bit of a learning experience, but it works well for this video, even if it is a little somber. I really did enjoy that build and would only do a few things differently, knowing what I know now about the hobby and the ship itself. Someday I'd also like to build up her sisters, Olympic and Britannic, and dress them up as they would have appeared during wartime, which I think could be a really interesting project sometime. In the 9 years since I completed this model, the ship has unfortunately suffered from a few accidents. No icebergs, but on 2 separate occasions a book and a picture frame fell onto the ship, which broke off the masts and the funnels. I've also moved twice since then, and despite my best efforts, there has been some damage as well. But luckily I kept the instructions and a few spare parts, and she looks as good as new. I've also started applying a little bit of rigging, but nothing too complicated, just enough to look nice from a distance. Nowadays, Titanic stands proudly on my bookcase next to USS Hornet in the same scale. Someday I'd like to revisit that ship too. Until then, thanks so much for watching. I do intend to build more ships when the time allows, and I also have a few other creative ideas to share on this channel, including more of my music and photography. If you liked what you saw, feel free to subscribe, but my feelings won't be hurt if you don't. I make these videos for fun, not for popularity. If you want to see the original video from 2012 without me talking all the way through it, I'll put a card up here and a link down below in the comments section. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.